Welcome to Michigan Justice Chronicles with Dan Geherin.
Hello and welcome to Michigan Justice Chronicles with board-certified criminal trial attorney Daniel T. Geherin. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist. Today we're going to talk about a case that most people know, at least know of, the Menendez brothers case from a while back. Dan, this was 36 years ago, I believe?
Time flies, yeah, in 1994, but here we are. You're exactly right.
Well, welcome back to the show. Thanks for being here. We've talked about some high-profile cases recently. I'm very interested to talk about this one. I remember this was from when I was a kid, but didn't know much about it at the time. I was about 10 or 11. You know, you started your career as a prosecutor in Los Angeles County, which is where the Menendez case took place. What do you remember about it?
Yeah, I remember a lot, at the time being very interested in it. And then sort of an odd thing in my life is I had a personal connection to it because my boss, her name was Pam Bozanich in the prosecutor's office, was one of the trial prosecutors. So I heard firsthand what she thought of the case. And you can still see her on all the Netflix shows, still out there 30 some years later talking about it. And the other strange thing is I've talked before about the O.J. Simpson trial, the Manson trial, three of the biggest, most infamous criminal justice trials of all time, including the Menendez. And I had a boss in Los Angeles that was a prosecutor in each one of those. So that sort of started my career, my interest in criminal justice. And I've always followed those cases. But as you know, Kevin, the Menendez case has taken a huge turn over the last year with Netflix documentaries and some people that are trying to get them released. So while I've thought about it over the years, it's now right back in our forefront and how it plays into juvenile justice, state of Michigan, how courts are changing their mindsets on justice for juveniles or young offenders. So, yeah, in a nutshell, carefully watch this case from a baby prosecutor to an experienced defense attorney and very interested in it.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. So to kind of recap for anyone who wasn't, doesn't remember or doesn't know, the brothers claimed they were physically and sexually abused by their father, and that is why they killed him. Do you know, is there evidence to support their claims?
Yeah, so one of the biggest sticking points that my boss had and the police had was they just didn't believe that. They thought that was, for lack of a better word, a convenient and Johnny-come-lately defense strategy birthed by one of the attorneys, Leslie Abramson, and they thought that because the boys, to their knowledge, had never said that before. In their therapy sessions had never revealed it per their therapist, and they just thought it was sort of convenient. Mm-hmm. But now what we're learning many, many years later is at least some of the boys had talked to other family members about it. The father himself may have been accused of other molestation or abuse allegations of other people. And so there is some corroboration to it. I think the better question is, does that really matter? And I'm happy to talk about sort of self-defense and what that defense means. But yeah, that's a real sticking point. And the police and prosecutors agree one thing, and maybe Menendez and the public might agree to another.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious about that. If let's say the abuse allegations were true, as far as the law goes, does that justify killing their father? And also they killed their mother too.
That's a great point. Let me work backwards. They would have had to successfully link mother to either the crime of abuse or the abuse itself, or some sort of failure to protect. But even if they had done that, under classic definitions of self-defense, that really doesn't meet the elements. In order to defend yourself with deadly force, in this case, shotgun blast to your parents, you'd literally have to show that you had an honest and reasonable belief that you needed to stop an abuse from happening really at that moment, or that you were fearful of being killed in some way because you were going to reveal their abuse. That's a very tough standard. And so, the public sort of gets lost in the, were they abused or were they not? But from us in the justice system, it didn't really rise to self-defense. As to mother, and even with father, that was a tough connection to make. So I think it's a bit of what we call a red herring, but it may be some way that it mitigates whether or not they deserve to die in prison or get out sometime soon.
What about self-defense in general, particularly where you are in Michigan? How is that regarded as far as, justifying criminal acts?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So self-defense in Michigan, like a lot of states, falls into two categories. Did you use deadly force or did you use non-deadly force, right? So someone's breaking into my house, I pull out a gun and I shoot him in the head, deadly force. It's going to require a certain standard for me to prove. They break into my house. I hit them in the ribs with a baseball bat. They run away. Probably non-deadly force, a little bit of a lower standard. But in general, a person has to show an honest and reasonable, that means from a reasonable objective standard, that they had to act to protect themselves or defense of others, their family or friends, from an imminent act of either death or criminal sexual conduct or home invasion. Something is happening imminently. I must act, and what I did, either deadly or non-deadly, is justified under the circumstances.
Okay. Okay. Now, back to the Menendez case. They say that they were sexually abused and that's why they killed their parents. What did the prosecutors say?
Prosecutor said, Johnny come lately, very convenient. They managed to keep most of the abuse allegations, if not all of them, out of the second trial in which the Menendezes were convicted. The first trial, in which ended in a mistrial, that judge allowed more allegations of abuse in. And so the second time around, the judge sort of erred the way I think the law says, to say those two things are not connected. You're not getting into it. So the prosecutors won that battle. And I think they believe that there was no such abuse justifying a murder, let alone abuse at all.
What do they think the motive was? Do you know?
So the police and prosecutors think it was greed and finances, because the boys, after the slayings, spent the next 6 months spending millions of dollars on cars and jewelry and hotel rooms in Beverly Hills, and looking as if they were enjoying the spoils of getting their inheritances from their deceased parents. And I think that's what they thought it was. I think these were just two bad kids that wanted an inheritance and wanted to try to get away with it. Now, his attorneys and those in the public eye that have followed the case think there's more to it than that. But, maybe it's somewhere in between. Maybe there was some abuse and they just got sick of it and thought, what better way to get our inheritance quicker than to end our abusers and put bullets in them. So maybe we'll never know. But the interesting question is, are they going to get released soon? That's what seems like the signs are pointing to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard about that as well. So, how old were the brothers when they committed this offense?
If I remember, it was 21 and 18, which wasn't truly relevant then, because they were adults under the system. They were charged as adults. They weren't juveniles. But it's gaining in relevance because more and more courts, California maybe even been at the forefront of this, including the United States Supreme Courts, are starting to recognize that the brain of people at that age is not fully developed, and maybe they shouldn't be treated the same in the justice system as people who are, say, 22 and above. And so their age wasn't relevant for charging, wasn't as relevant then, but boy, is it becoming more and more relevant to how courts are seeing what should happen to them.
So there's thoughts that wow, that's interesting. So we've always known it as 18, like 18, you tried as an adult, but now they're thinking, because the evidence shows that brains aren't fully developed, that they may have to push back how they treat, at what age they treat them solely as adults. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Sort of. Great question. So in Michigan, we had what we called raise the age legislation, just 2021, 4 years ago. Our juvenile justice used to be stopping at age 17. So 17-year-olds were adult in Michigan. We're one of only a few states that had that. And we raised the age to 18 to mimic what most other states do. That's number one. Number two, a lot of the courts are saying, well, look, we're going to treat people as adults. That's fine. But life without parole for someone who's 18, 19, 20 may not be what's considered cruel. It may be cruel and unusual. It may not be proper sentencing structure because of the philosophy of the brain. So it's really about sentencing more than it is about treating them as adults. And that's where you're seeing more courts say, let's not just lock them up and lock away the key when they're committing serious offenses at that 18 to 21 age. And the Supreme Court of the country is backing that up, and it is starting to recognize to give youthful people a little bit more protection under the law.
That's such an interesting thing. I mean, do you think, will it depend on the crime?
No doubt, right? Because the most serious crimes in Michigan and most states are what are going to put juveniles away potentially for the rest of their life. Capital offenses, most often going to be homicide. So lower level things, I don't think you're going to have as much interplay with the courts, but I do see it day to day. I do a lot of juvenile work, juvenile justice, and I think that 20 years ago you had hardline judges and prosecutors, and now you have a much more progressive, much more rehabilitative goal of juvenile courts, because I think courts are recognizing that kids, young people, young adults, even up to 2021, they're not making the most fully informed decisions. And it is smart to maybe distinguish them from people who are several years older.
I mean, I never committed capital offenses, but I think about some of the decisions I made in my early 20s, and it was not exactly the smartest things I've ever done in my life. So I guess I can understand why that would be the case.
There's no doubt. And once, I became a parent, my kids are that age now, it's you see it and you hope that they, do the right things, but peer pressure and influence and controlled substances and alcohol and all these things. And if they do commit crimes, you want to make sure that the law is protecting them maybe just a little bit more than someone who's 30 or 40 years old and their brains are fully developed. So yeah, but for the grace of God go I, and people like us. And it is important to recognize that kids make mistakes, and we don't always have to treat them, lump them into adults in the justice system.
Well, you're in a college town too. You're in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where University of Michigan is. So, I mean, you see this as much as anybody as far as the I don't I don't want to just be mean, but the dumb things that college kids do.
People ask me what I do for a living. I often say I get dumb kids out of trouble because not only, is the University of Michigan here, Michigan State's an hour away, Eastern Michigan is here. So you're talking about 130,000 undergrad students year in and year out that are committing, stupid mistakes, as you said. And oftentimes these mistakes are not intended to harm people or intended to be breaking the law, but they are making mistakes that need help of good criminal justice attorneys.
Yeah, no doubt. Back to the Menendez case. What do you see happening here? Or how do you see this unfolding?
Yeah, you'd asked me that question a year and a half ago. I'd say they're going to die in prison. You ask me that right now in May of 2025, the tea leaves suggest they're going to get out, and they're going to get out relatively soon. The courts have just resentenced them essentially to term of prison, which they've already served. So if the Department of Corrections gives them credit for what they have, if there's no appeals going on, and there may be, I think they're going to be out within a couple of years and on parole and living amongst us.
What was their sentence?
So if I recall, they were originally both sentenced to life. And in California, life has generally gone through different progressions, life without parole, then it was life with the possibility of parole. And a judge has recently resentenced them to a term of years, 25 years, which they've served then some. So now it's just a matter of, are they going to be paroled? Is there going to be appeals? And like I said, I think that the tea leaves suggest they're going to be out relatively soon.
What was the reason for reopening and and bringing all of this back up again initially?
Groundswell, they had some high profile people in their corner, attorneys, and I think some of the celebrity people that were on their side, not to mention a lot of the surviving family members, the parents, the deceased parents, brothers and sisters and uncles. They came out and for the most part have supported the boys, saying enough is enough. They've served their time. Then you have the Netflix factor and, just trying to draw eyeballs to a story. And that's gotten a lot of the public to say, look, if they were abused in the way that they said, haven't they served enough time? That's sort of groundswell. And then last but not least, Kevin, I think you had some politicians that maybe were trying to benefit from it, not to say, what the prosecutor out there was doing or the governor, but I think they read the political tea leaves and thought it was an advantage if they maybe sided with the Menendezes. And so all those up, add them in a pot, and you've got sort of the renewed interest to possibly get them out.
Do you see this causing more cases to get opened like this?
That's an interesting question. I think anyone that's in prison throughout the country that did their crime anywhere from age 17 to 20 is looking at this carefully, seeing the changes that have gone on with the Supreme Court and the states. And if they're not out or they're not being resentenced, they are working with their public defenders or their attorneys to try to be resentenced, because I think it's bigger than just the Menendezes. I think it is a product of recognizing youthful mistakes should be treated a little bit differently than adults. And yeah, it could open up other people to say, wait a minute, they were let out. What about me? We'll see how that goes.
Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you think that, okay, this was a high profile case and all that. Mine wasn't, but why do they get different treatment than me? I could totally see having that feeling if I'm in jail in the same circumstance.
Yeah, let's not forget, these boys weren't celebrities, even though it seems like they were, right? Yeah. They've become sort of social media celebrities or pop culture celebrities, but they just happen to be, affluent kids with people in their corner. And those factors with the political climate and the change in juvenile justice has really helped them, along with the Netflix factor that's gotten people on their side.
Netflix factor does not hurt. That's for sure.
Does not hurt.
That is for sure. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today on Michigan Justice Chronicles with board-certified criminal attorney Daniel T. Geherin. For more information or to connect with Dan and the team, visit glgmichigan.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave us a review. Dan, yet another really interesting case here. Thanks so much for shedding some light on it.
I'm happy to, Kevin. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.